too nice, but thank you. I'm glad to be back here again.
That's great. We're really excited because there's been so much movement, and we are curious, and our fans are always curious about how this stuff happens. I mean, the inner workings is crazy. And you have your finger on the pulse of this. So awesome to hear about all the stuff that's been going on.
Yeah,
And
looking forward to it.
you met Jason Berkeley, who is of course a hardcore Red Wings fan.
Yes.
And so he had a question for you about Luc Robitaille and the Red Wings.
I'm dying to know how he came to Detroit. That's a huge thing for me.
Yeah, it was summer 2001, I believe so, or something like that, because they won the cup in 02.
Yes, correct.
So, and Luke was back in LA, and he had a year left on his contract. And if I recall, Dave Taylor was a GM there. I remember Tim Lewicki was involved, and so on and so forth. So the Kings had made an offer to bring Luke back on a one-year deal at $2.2 million or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. And we were looking for a 2-year deal, and we decided to go to free agency. And I remember that day because it was pretty hectic, as always. It's always hectic on July 1st, and
Sure.
we were talking to a few teams. We had like 4 or 5 teams involved in being interested in Luke. And we were also working, we were close to Mike Barnett, who was representing Brett Hall at that time. So Brett Hall was signing, Luke was interested, so there were a lot of moving parts. And anyway, long story short, I remember we did a 2-year deal for, it was $4 million a year or $4.5 million a year with $1 million in other words, back then, so it was worth $9 million over 2 years.
Wow.
Where the best offer from the Kings was 2.2 on a 1-year deal, and you don't know this.
Are you kidding?
I mean, I remember that, and it meant a lot, not only the security, but also the
Sure.
AAV, the average. And so Luke went to Detroit, was guaranteed to making the $9 million, and he got a cup.
Yeah.
Got more experience, and yeah, so
Not too shabby.
not
Yeah,
too shabby.
not
That
too
was
shabby
one of
at all.
those great deals. It worked out great for him and the Red Wings.
I ran into him recently a few years ago when I was living in Brentwood
Mm-hmm.
at the California Chicken Cafe. He was getting some food there for like a party of some sort. And I had my Red Wings shirt on. I went up to him and said hello. We talked for a few minutes. Super nice guy.
Yeah.
So my wife and I have dinner. We leave. We had to go get a birthday cake over at Susie Cakes in Brentwood.
Mm-hmm.
We pull in. I get out of the car. He's there as well. I said, Luke, I swear to God, I'm not stalking you. I said, are you stalking me? He said, no, I swear. It was a very funny thing, but just a really nice guy. And whenever there's a player that's won a cup like that,
Mhm.
they go down in history in a great sports town like Detroit as a hero.
Yeah.
And what was it like for him to come back then to LA and then win a cup as a president? I mean, was it a different type of a feel for him, or what? How was it?
It was a different type of feel, but at the same time, I remember talking to him a lot about it. The experience that he gained by playing in Detroit, winning in Detroit, playing with a lot of Hall of Famers. I mean, the coach, general manager Ken Holland will be in the Hall of Fame if he's not,
Right.
and Shanahan, Hall, all those guys, Lidstrom and Fedorov, and geez, who else? Eiserman, and so.
Yeah.
So he's always coming back to these times in the experience he had in Detroit, and I know it was a building block in order to win in LA. Although I know he had not much to do with the actual fabrication, so to speak, of the hockey team, the team like it was Dean Lombardi and Coach Sutter. But Luke being involved with it somehow had a lot to do with, I believe, winning the 2 cups that the Kings had to win
Sure.
as a president. So he goes back. These stories you gain, it's experience, and these experiences in Detroit. Same thing for Shanahan and Eiserman, all those
Mhm.
guys.
They know what it takes.
They know exactly. So.
Well, it was tremendous. I mean, of course, Jason Berkeley with a cup winner like Luc Robitaille in Detroit, you had to be stalking him.
I swear I wasn't. It was purely by chance. And that was the funny thing about it. He saw me and he kind of recognized me, he kind of went like that. I said, Luke, I swear.
So you again?
Yeah, exactly.
I just want you to sign my Red Wings wallet, really. That's all.
Right.
Just get out your pen and we'll.
You weren't supposed to mention the wallet, remember?
Well, there was a lot of movement over the summer, and obviously, we were just, there it is.
Oh, God.
I mean,
I'm sorry, it's
that's
a bit
true.
much, but yeah, okay.
But, we're pretty impressed with, the combination of Tavares and Matthews in Toronto. And, that must have been some test to get Tavares to his, spot. I'm sure there was a lot of action and people vying for, to get John Tavares to their team.
Well, absolutely. I mean, as I said before, in the past few months, since July 1st, I mean, I've told the story a few times. I mean, it was quite an experience. I mean, when John came to LA and we went through the interview period, which was about 5 days. It was pretty intensive, and we had a couple teams every a day, 2-hour presentations, and between each presentations, we had to spend some time thinking about each of them. Right up to that point, I didn't know at all where John was going to sign. I mean, I thought he was going to probably stay in Long Island.
Wow, really?
Yeah, I thought, and I said it before publicly, I mean, I thought the odds were probably 70-30, so to speak. And when the process started, I mean, everything kind of unfolded differently, and he finally made a decision towards the end of the week to go forward with trying to sign with the Leafs. So.
Is it something that was, because it was his hometown, that made a difference? Is that something that really factors in with some of these guys when they make these decisions that are life-changing decisions, really?
Yeah, and again, as I said, I mean, the fact that it was his hometown had something to do with it, but at the same time is the timing of the roster, perhaps where they're at. It made him feel very comfortable having a young roster and young superstars like Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner and Morgan Riley, Jake Gardner, all those guys who were part of the roster. And he absorbed everything. He asked a lot of questions, and it was a John's decision. At the end of the day, you have to listen to the artist and what they want and how they want to craft their picture, so to speak. They're asking you questions. Opinion, you always give your honest opinion, but you have to do what's best for them and their family at the end of the day.
Wow.
No, that's the bottom line.
Was it down to 2 teams at the last minute that he kind of just said, I gotta go with Toronto, or was it something
Not
that?
so much. I mean, it was hard to, and I know not everyone will agree on this, but it was hard for him to leave the Islanders organization.
Sure.
I mean, a lot of people in Long Island may say, well, he left it, but it was hard on him. It was hard on him. He was vested with that organization. He did everything first class, and he was there for 9 years, and he's a first class guy too.
Sure.
He's such a great example. All the other teams, the speculations that other teams were closer. I mean, we had 5 teams in LA here, and they all did a great job.
Well, I'm sure that it was, a big push to try to get him. Any team was gonna be better for having John Tavares on the roster, and huge now for Toronto. Just looks like they're just gobbling it up and loving it.
Yeah, I mean, he's such again, a great player in there with 90-some points last year, and he's always a threat offensively. It also is such a great example in the locker room, and it has a domino effect of having him in the locker room with every presentation. That's something to do with John being in addition to the power plays of the Dallas Stars or Boston Bruins or Tampa Bay Lightning, all the teams, the San Jose Sharks. It was always, the presentations were pretty amazing because each case he was going to add a lot to the offense.
No question. I mean,
Everywhere he
absolutely.
went. So.
Yeah.
Well, and on that note, it's great that the Maple Leafs are doing well. I mean, it leaves a hole in the Islanders, and the Islanders named Anders Lee to be the captain, and I was sure that would be the best choice for them. A lot of people thought Barzal might get it just as a young player to kind of grow through in the captaincy, but I mean, what do you think about that decision to take a more experienced guy over Barzal?
Well, Matthew, we work with Matthew, and he's it's his 3rd year in the league now, and so
Amazing
he's
player.
young. He's an amazing player. He's a
Skates
fascinating
like
skater. One of the best skater in the game right now. Could change a game. He proved to everyone last year how he could play the game. But being a captain, I mean, sometimes I believe it takes a little time to mature, be ready for that role, and Anders Lee is at a good age perhaps to fulfill that seat, and eventually Matthew may become the captain, or may have a name in his jersey, and but also the fact that he played with John last year, learned a lot from him.
Oh, yeah.
And no, Barzal is spectacular to watch. It's some people you pay to watch, and he's one of those. Well, you'll pay; he's worth the price of admission.
You know, he skates in like it's amazing to watch him
Yeah.
do what he does, because I've never seen a guy just the way that he transitions the puck. It's so fast.
Yeah.
And it's almost like it's a delicate move, but you see him, he's like a freight train going through the middle, and
Yeah,
he's
it's effortless too. It's
absolutely. He
graceful.
looks like he's a total natural.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I mean, I think Anders Lee is a great choice. We've had him on the Dr. Hockey podcast. We
Yeah.
hope to have him back. He's
Very smart
he's a
guy, very nice guy, yeah.
very nice guy, very smart. I think he got married this summer, either this summer or he's getting married next summer. But I know he was like, I know Tavares got married this summer. There's a lot of weddings. But
Yeah.
my dad actually had all the Kings on his golf course, with
Yeah.
Toffoli getting married in Maui.
Yeah, he did.
Which was hilarious. Yeah, he said, hey, do you know any of these names? My dad calls me up, and he starts reading down the names. He's like, how about this guy, Martin, Jeff Martin from the Shannon? I was like, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
They were all there like for the wedding. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I was always curious about something, when they always talk about a guy going into a contract year, and they talk about him playing better to have his stats, and then you sometimes will see a guy that maybe after they sign the big contract, will sometimes fade.
Yeah.
What is that about? I've always been curious, like, what the mindset is of that, and why that's the case. What is it is it they're just trying harder, or?
No, I mean, some players, first of all, the platform year is always important. Platform
Sure.
year is always the year prior to your contract being up. You could have, let's say, you could look at a player's last 4 years, for instance, and year one, he could have had an excellent season, year two, okay, year three, another great year, and year four, prior to his contract, like not as good of a season, so the leverage goes a little bit lower at that point. You wanna have a great platform year, so I do believe that all players wanna have great seasons all the time. And when it comes down to contracts, a lot of times pressure comes with it too. You don't score, 2 games in a row, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 6, and all of a
Right.
sudden you start to grab the stick a little tight, and there's a lot, the mindset is 90% of the game. I mean, at that point, you're either a talented player or you're not as much. You have work ethic or less work ethic, but the mindset, how to prepare your mind to be consistent every night is such a treasure, if you know how to handle that. And it's a gift that not everyone has. So some players have a hard time to play for a contract. Other players, I do remember Maxim Talbot, he had the last year of his contract in Pittsburgh before they won the cup, he had 2 goals up to December or so. And we ended up doing a 3-year deal, a 4-year deal for Max, not so sure anyway with the Penguins, and he took off right after he signed his contract at 2. He went from 2 to 16 goals or something like that, and then he scored the 2 most important goals
Right.
against your favorite team.
I know.
And
You have to remind me. It's
so, and I remember teasing everyone after the game in the locker room. I was talking to Mario and Rumberg, and so I said, we should have waited, Max, we should have waited for that contract, right now we have so much leverage, and Max, he was laughing, he says, you know what, after I signed that deal, I felt so much better, I felt so much at ease, and I was able to perform better. So, you have to understand your client, you have to understand your player. That's what people sometimes don't seem to get,
I remember in that game, at some point, somebody said, one of the announcers goes, Talbot, looking for the hat trick. I was like, I bet those are words he never thought he was gonna hear in the Stanley Cup final. But he did.
Not too many players.
He killed it.
He killed
was
it.
doing
He
so
killed it.
great.
Yeah.
He did kill the Red Wings.
Yeah.
It was great to watch.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed those games myself, by the way.
I did not watch them raise it. The second the game ended, I ran out with
You
tears in
couldn't
my
take it.
no, with tears in my eyes. I ran out to Joe Louis, and that was it for me. Never to hear from him again.
Well, and look at the Penguins are having a hard part of the year already. I mean, they've already lost Matt Murray, and I think they've got they've got some issues this year, which is weird. I mean, they still have great players, but they've got to make some moves. And all they did over the summer was bring on Jack Johnson, was the notable. They dealt some players away. I saw Carter Rowney down on the Ducks. Watched him play the other night, and some other players. I think they got rid of Connor Sherry went somewhere. I think he went to Buffalo. Is that right? So that's going to help them. But I don't know.
Well, the cap system, you can't keep everybody.
That's right.
You gotta revamp yourself year after year. And I thought, and I saw the Penguins a couple of weeks ago in Pittsburgh actually, and I thought they looked pretty good. I watched practice and I looked at their depth, and I thought they were ready for big season, a year, a longer summer. Now, I mean, this is a team that understands adversity better than anyone, and they know how to overcome that. So that Matt Martin's out, Matt Murray's out now for I don't know how long, but I do believe they'll find a way.
They always do. They'll definitely be in the playoffs for sure. But they, it's tough. I mean, that team has it always has problems because of cap issues. They've got big players, big names, and they've got the supporting cast is so important to how they're going to perform. So making those moves is it's key. I think they've got the right people in the right places, but tough to know.
Absolutely.
Have you ever had a player on your team? I always be curious about this because obviously the goal of everyone in the NHL is to win the Stanley Cup. So if you have a guy who's on a team, whether it's the Penguins from a couple of years ago or even the Kings recently or the Blackhawks, and the team is great, they're poised to potentially either repeat, whatever, do you ever have anybody that's willing to take less money to stay rather than cause a problem with the cap and then go somewhere else just for the more money, but they know they're not going to win?
Absolutely. I mean, again, the well-being of the player and the family is so important. Where he could be at his best in order to perform. I'll give you an example. I mean, when we did the Kane and Taves in Chicago years ago, they signed for 10.5 each, which is a pretty high AAV.
Sure.
We had the leverage to go to 11 million a year. I do believe we did, because at the end of the day, if we wanted 11 and a half at a time of leverage, I don't think they would have let those players go. Right. They would have traded, and then they wouldn't have traded. They would have, but they understood. Okay, if we take 10 and a half, which is plenty. The way the deal was structured also was front loaded, and we felt it made sense. And they were both happy. They wanted to stay in Chicago. It's a great place to play hockey, great organization, so on and so forth. So I see a lot of cases where players don't take the last penny. John Tavares took 11 million times 7 to play in Toronto. He could have had north of 12 million or even closer to 13 million in certain cases if we had to go for the last penny. But he decided to take 11, and there's other players who have to sign with the organization in order for this team to sustain. So who knows where the cap's going to be in a year or two from now? And that's the thing. You have to answer your question. Yes, and a lot of times players could leverage. They have the leverage to take a little more, and they don't.
I think you see that more with hockey players rather than other sports. You see that more with the NHL. The guys would be willing to do that. It's
a team sport. I mean, no Stanley Cups is won by 1 or 2 players. I mean, it's a complete. You need a great goaltending. You need great Ds. You need great entry-level players to surprise you on the upside. You need guys who play their role, and you need superstars. You need guys. I mean, that's great. It's a perfect. You need the perfect puzzle, and that's how our game is created. Now, if you look at basketball, I mean, one player could take you to the final by himself. It's a different dynamic completely. Right. And so our cultures, our players understand that.
Yeah, and that's where the cap and working the cap and making it work for everybody else. I remember probably it was like 1988 or 89, the Rangers had like a crazy salary. It was like their payroll was something like 120 million or something, like something totally insane.
It was probably like 80 or 90 back then.
I don't know. It was so far off the charts compared to anybody else, and they just it didn't help them, by the way. They weren't able to get a cup until '94 when they got the right players, but I mean they were doing anything they could to try to get in the zone, and it just was unfair because they could just spend. They had the money to do it, and the other small market teams could not do that to save their lives.
Yeah.
And it did make for problems, because they pooled so much talent and, you know, left the rest of the team sort of dry.
Yeah, and, you know, and speaking of the cap system and how it works too, and speaking of how to treat players and what's important to them, you may have other players, other examples, like for instance, a player's 20, 30 years old, for instance, and he's made some money. And with the team that he's with, there's no space for him to really capitalize, and it's his last contract. And he says to himself, I could sign a 2-year deal for $3 million a year, or I can sign a 4-year deal for maybe $4 million a year or $5 million a year. What should I do? I have a better chance to win if I stay, but I have a better chance to, because what's important, the lifespan of an athlete could be short. And after escrow, lifestyle, and if you live in the state of California, you don't have much left. I mean, that's what I explain to people, like, you know, a 5-year deal for $20 million, it's $4 million a year, but if you live in California after escrow, agent fees, all that stuff, lifestyle, you may be happy, you're lucky if you have $8 million left. You know,
Wow.
and less than that, you know what I mean?
Isn't that's crazy?
It's crazy.
So you have to also consider that, when you gotta hit while the iron is hot, and understand all of that.
I've always been curious too. Years ago, when Patrick Waugh went over to his coach, the infamous game, where he went over to the coach, says, last time I'm dressing as Canadian.
Mario Trombley.
Yep, and that was it for him, and he went shipped off to Colorado the next day. Do you ever have a player that comes to you and says, okay, you gotta get me out of so-and-so, I gotta get out of here, I can't, whatever you do, figure something out, get me out.
It's happened a lot, and, you know,
I've always liked
it
to-
never makes the surface though, a lot of times in the emotions after games, you know, I would say it happens, I would say 20 times a year, if not more.
Wow.
We have, what, 80, 90 clients, and, you know, we have also minor league
Sure,
players as well,
sure.
so the get me out of here thing comes a lot. But it's an emotional thing, you know, at times you do the 24-hour rest, and, you know, we circle back, and, but then it becomes, at times it becomes consistent, and then you have to deal with the issues, and sometimes it becomes real that, okay, now we have to work for, you know, look at a solution in order to.
Sounds like you're more of a therapist sometimes with some of the players.
We do a lot of
So,
therapy, you
that's-
know, we
yeah.
do. I often say, when I leave in the morning, my tank is full of gas, and at the end of the day, I don't get to pour gas in my tank much
Right.
at times, and you gotta be strong that way as well,
Yeah.
be ready for that.
Well, back to some of our case examples. I mean, we had Emerson Itimen on the podcast about 4 weeks ago, and he was a guy, just to refresh your memory, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he was a a first-round draft pick, 29th overall in 2010.
Yeah.
And got traded around a little bit. Finally was playing pretty well, and he got injured. He had a knee-on-knee injury that has taken two years really to get him healed. He played in the KHL a little bit last year. He had a great summer. Came back, got a tryout with the Kings. He looked great. Saw him play. They were happy with him. But there's no space for him, so they signed him to some sort of a holding deal in their AHL team. At the rate. Yeah.
Not to try out or something?
Yeah, something where they can extend it too, and kind of keep him banked there without putting him on waivers. So tell us how that works, because I mean, he's a great player. I think they want him, or they would, I think, told him like, no thanks.
Yeah, I don't know the story exactly. I know Emerson, when he played and grew up in California, was drafted by the Ducks, and a great young athlete. I mean, amazing, gifted athlete. I remember him working out with T.R. Goodman actually in Venice, and very respectful young player, and a great example of a young kid growing up in California. And yeah, unfortunately, if he got hurt like that and had to go play away and come back, again, it's all about leverage and where you're at in your career. Emerson is what, now 20?
It's gonna be 26.
26
Yeah.
or so you gotta stage your career also where there's a lot of young guys pushing, and then teams are structured in a way, unless you so impactful in that tryout, so unless you're dominating so much, then you fall into a category where you'll get offered a PTO, you know, professional tryout, perhaps 25 games, or maybe a two-way contract, AHL, East Coast League, and then you gotta hope to rebuild sometimes, and unless you bring a special skill to a team that, oh my God, you could make it.
We gotta have
you
him
know,
for
we
something.
gotta have him, exactly, and that happens a lot when the player has to make that decision to whether he should play in the American League or he should go to Europe and then start thinking about something else,
Right,
you know?
and it's sort of a limbo time, I think, for him right now, because it sounds like they want him, you know,
Yeah.
and I'm sure he wants to be on the Kings, it would be amazing, but
So where is he now? Is he?
with the rain
He's
in
with the Rain, okay.
Ontario.
Yeah,
And, you know, I went and saw him play, and he scored a bunch of goals in all of the
Mhm.
preseason games.
Yeah.
He looked great, buried a goal in front of us in Anaheim, playing the Kings.
yeah,
Sorry, playing the Ducks, and on Ryan Miller. And, you know, he looks like he's back. I mean,
Yeah.
I think, you know, from a objective standpoint, as a guy watching this for him, I
Mhm.
think that I gotta play devil's advocate with the guys who would sign him and say, well, you know, is his knee really okay?
yeah,
You know, he looks great and he's killing it, but, you know, you wanna see that there's, you know, that he's truly healed. I mean,
Yeah.
That always concerns me as a physician.
sure. If he's consistent now back and showing that he's impactful, he will get some interest, and it could be with
Yeah,
the
he looked
Kings.
amazing.
If he has a contract, which I don't know again the status of his situation, but if he has a one-way contract in the American League or something like that, then he'll get an opportunity if he does well with the Kings perhaps, or maybe another
Or
team.
elsewhere.
Or elsewhere, a team may be interested in his services, and at that point, they may offer him a contract, and you're gonna have to talk to the Kings also, because they.
Right, because
have
they've
his
got the rights on him,
Mhm.
yeah, well, I mean, obviously, we're pulling for him, we think he's great, but, he's just been through a whole lot.
Oh, for
His-
sure.
His injuries are brutal, I mean,
They're brutal.
yeah, my wife just texted me that Kessler's on the ice in Anaheim too, and
Mhm.
speaking of guys who's coming back from hip injuries,
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like a lot of, you know, these joint injuries put guys out quite some time, you know. Now, Corey Perry's out with knees.
It's been a lot of injuries this year so far.
been awful.
Yeah, it's early, yeah.
It's awful, I mean, that's the problem.
Quick is out for the goalie for the Kings. I mean, there's a lot of guys that are,
Roberto Luongo.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, these aren't like light injuries, these are like, they're months of rehab,
Mhm.
and by the way, they hurt the whole time.
And they're not just run-of-the-mill players. I mean, Corey Perry's out for 6 weeks, or was it 6 months?
6 months?
Yeah.
I mean, that's.
It changed the dynamic of a team.
At a
like that.
time of his career also, where, you know, Corey's 31 or 32.
32, I think, yeah.
32, so, no, I mean, it's not an easy business. It's not easy to be consistent again and to be a great player and to stay on the ice and to perform.
What happens for the team? Corey Perry, he goes out, you know, has to have knee surgery. What happens now with his salary position? Does it go to an insurance? Is there a way that they can bring somebody into that position?
Yeah, he's
What
on
happens to the
long-term,
Ducks?
he's on long-term injured reserve, and at that point, the Ducks could replace that money, that salary.
But doesn't that change if the player's over 35? That there's a certain amount that comes against the cap, I thought? It was.
No, over 35, if it's a player, either, you know, well, first of all, over 35, if you sign the contract after age 35, it's a one-year deal, you can have performance bonuses. There's a few criteria that are changing after 35.
Okay.
You know, it affects the cap in certain ways, but in a case like Corey, he signed a long-term deal before, he's 32 anyway, he'll be on LTI, and the team also, each teams are allowed to insure up to 80%, X amount of players, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 6, maybe 8, might be less, I'm not so sure, don't quote me on that. And they'll be, well, he's making $8 million a year, I think, 8.25.
Somewhere in that neighborhood, yeah.
So probably 6 to 6.5 million is covered by the insurance and to the team from a hard cash standpoint. And the team has to absorb the rest, but then they can also replace, LTI, there's a numbers of days and you gotta play, that's why apologists, that's why it's important to understand, you know, when to put a player in LTI and deal with all
The reason
that.
I'm asking about that too is because obviously, you know, Henrik Zetterberg recently had to basically call it quits. He came
Yeah.
in, he still has about 3 years left on his deal.
Yeah, and when he signed his contract, he was after 35.
Yes.
He was after
He
35.
just turned 38, I think,
Yeah,
today or
well, that
something.
will count against the cap.
Right, and it would say, but it's a percentage though, isn't it a certain like percentage or is the whole
The whole amount will count against the cap.
Oh, it does?
Yeah.
Okay.
And after age 35, if he did sign, now that's why you'll see, he may get traded, perhaps.
They did that with Datsyuk's
Yeah,
contract
he
in
may,
Arizona,
and
right?
and all of this changes sometimes on a year-to-year basis, there's
Sure.
a few adjustments, so again, I always have to revisit these
course.
things, this isn't something that I deal with every day, or we
Right.
all do. So usually when we have a case like that, or potential case like that, we revisit, you know, I'll get Jim Nice in my office, and Jimmy will look into it, he knows pretty much all that, and then we go back and forth, a lot of times, things change, and it either slip my mind, or, but,
Well, yeah, I mean, these are complex rulings and, you know, it can really affect the outcome for the team.
Yeah.
I mean, that was our, you know, we're sort of looking at Corey Perry going out and just thinking, well, there's gotta be a way they can replace that talent, you know, especially given the fact that it's months.
yeah.
I mean, that doesn't help the Ducks to have, you know, one of their, you know, leading guys down for the count. It's very
No.
painful to watch.
No, definitely not. Now, they have some young players that are given an opportunity,
Oh, yeah.
on the Ducks, and what, they're 3-0 so far, I think, so. Is
Yeah.
that 3-0? I'm not
Yeah,
so
3-0, and they're
Yeah.
playing Coyotes right now, it's 1-1, so we'll see how they make out. And another big question, I mean, again, the cap issues in these contracts are really sort of interesting to us, because it does affect the outcome, who's gonna score the goals and who's gonna get it done. With the Vegas Golden Knights, I mean, they had to release James Neal, who went to Calgary, which I think is great for
Yeah.
Calgary, that's a huge win.
Yeah,
Changes the tenor of the Golden Knights, because clearly James Neal had to be one of, even though he wasn't the captain, he had to be one of the emotional captains of the team.
for sure.
And they bring in Paul Stastny, and then they get, you know, Max Pacioretty,
Mhm.
so that the team is totally different. You know, from a cap standpoint, from a contract standpoint, do these GMs, you know, they obviously think about who they're bringing in and who the chemistry that they
Yeah.
want.
Yeah,
But is it ever there where they say to themselves, you know what, the chemistry that we need, and, like, James Neal has to stay.
Mhm.
There has to be a way to keep him, because they could have kept him, but it would have cost them something else.
yeah.
So is it ever where they say, you know, we're gonna take this big hit because we gotta keep our main guy, and, you know, even though we have these other opportunities, we wanna just stay with what we have? I mean, cause it would have cost them, they would have had to deal with some other players for sure.
Well, James Neal, from what I understand, I think it was making $5 million, his cap.
Yeah, I think he
before.
was 5 or.
And he's at 5 now, I think, in Calgary, so he didn't get much of a raise, if I'm looking at it.
Lateral move.
I haven't looked at the numbers, but
Yeah.
pretty close, I think. In this case, I mean, again, each teams have, you know, they make their own decisions as of who's important, who fits right, and who, you know, will fit into the locker room on and off the ice, and who's gonna bring, you know, based on the dollars as well. And so they make decisions, sometimes whether they're right or wrong at the time, they think they're right, and we always look at the end of the season looking, they made
That's
the right
right.
or wrong decision. So it becomes a mind more, sometimes it's a chemistry thing, and sometimes only teams know internally why they make certain decisions. And we find out, you know, we talk to
Sure.
teams a lot, and certain things are confidential, and certain things, you know, obviously, we discuss with us internally, and we just keep it the way it is, you know, in terms of, from a confidentiality standpoint. But, you know, there's 31 teams out there trying to get better year after year and win the Stanley Cup, and they have architects and the general managers, and they have directors of player development. They have so many voices. They have the owners' voices too. Certain teams have, you know, the owners really involved, in presidents and all that. So navigating through all this isn't easy for a general manager, in my opinion, and satisfying the fans also, and the sponsors, and who's bringing, who's writing the big checks in the building, and who wants that type of player. And so there's so many different pieces.
So with a young player, for example, with Rasmus Dahlin, that was just entered the league, and so much hype surrounding him and everything else, #1 pick, how does negotiating a contract for basically a kid like that hasn't done anything in the NHL yet, compared to a veteran that's proved himself, but you're still able to get a large amount of money for that kid, and basically a long-term contract? How do you negotiate those waters for that as opposed to a veteran?
Yeah, well, the entry-level contracts are fairly simple to do, and Dahlin was an easy contract to do because his first pick overall, and they basically get the cap maximum they could get under entry-level rules. goes, so.
What is the cap?
Which is about 975 you can make, which 10% of that is a signing bonus per year. And there's A bonuses and B bonuses that are part of it. The A's are obtainable easier than the B's. The A's, you could get a maximum of you could 850, I believe. You could, and the B's are $2 million. In order to obtain the B's, you gotta be, if you're a forward, you gotta be either top 10 in goals, assists, and or points in order to obtain them. Like a guy like Austin Matthews, for instance, he's still under his entry-level contract. He was first pick overall. He will be getting, I assume he will be getting his full A's and B's. Not every player has the A's and B's in their, usually it's the first pick up to the 6th, 7th pick that gets some B's and maybe up to 10, 12. But again, negotiating an entry-level contract is fairly simple compared to a Group 2 player with salary yard and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I'm sure a player like this Kovalchuk contract must have been somewhat unique because he's free agent, correct?
He's a free agent.
So,
he was able to sign whatever he wanted, even before July 1st, and it's, as an agent, you want, as a player, you want to be a UFA. You know, the leverage, you decide to go where you want, pretty much, where you want it, and so.
But that, for the cap though, Kovalchuk doesn't really have a big impact for the Kings, is that correct?
Well, his average at AAV is 6.25, I believe.
Right.
Like Patrick Marleau, we did Marleau in Toronto a few years ago, and we did Kovalchuk here. Same impact, same AAV, so that's the cap space. He's taking 6.25.
So but he's I think he's going to bring some. Looks like he looks great on the ice.
Looks really good.
Isn't it amazing? I mean,
very proud of what he's doing so far. I mean, his feet are still good, and he's he's doing well. And he's happy to be back here and spend some time with him. He's a great guy. I didn't know Colby before. I got to spend some time this summer with him, and I'm very impressed with his personality and the way he thinks the game and the way he talks about many subjects in general. His experiences go back to Europe was one, and come back, to Russia. And being in North America again, he's excited, and he's got 4 young kids, and
oh, really?
he's good father. He's got a great wife. Anyway, it's a great story. So
Some of these
cheer
guys,
for him.
you see, some of these guys that come from the KHL after being in the NHL and they come back is a bit of a transition, almost a bit of a. He didn't look like he's lost a step. I mean, I saw him play on Sunday.
Yeah.
And I said, wow, he's like he's never left. He's out there. He's very fast. I mean, he's involved in the play, going after the pucks. I mean, there's not much of a lag there at all.
Yeah. It's like when Yacker came back from the KHL.
Right.
I mean, I remember talking to Yarmakers. I did his deal in Russia for him, and we represented him also prior to him leaving for Russia. And I didn't want him to go to the KHL at that time. I thought he had some years left. And then when he came back from Russia, at first I didn't think he was going to be impactful, and he was. So. Well, they're special beasts.
Oh,
they're
he's something
the
else.
Yagers and the Kovalchuks.
I felt bad he couldn't get that 1-year deal to kind of break the record. It's games played and.
Yeah, we saw him a couple of years ago, and he faked. Speaking of Josh Manson, he faked him out of his jock strap and scored. It was so fun watching him play. He's just amazing.
Just amazing.
I mean, I think he was like 46 or something at the time, and I think
he retired at 45.
Or maybe 45. I mean, whatever it was, he just looked amazing. I mean, it was like he was out there skating with these, 18, 19, 20-year-olds like it was nothing.
Yeah.
Really amazing. Well, I think, in terms of this upcoming year, who do you think has the best chance to win the Stanley Cup right now? I mean, it's a brand new year. The teams have shuffled. Do the Caps have a chance to repeat? Is that in the cards for them?
I think they have a chance to repeat. I mean, anytime I try to make predictions, in the hockey world for some reasons, I mean, I'm wrong. I mean, in a sense that there's so many good teams. I mean, and timing and momentum. So
of course,
we're talking here. We're almost mid-October. Things will be way different by February, March, and April. And how you enter the playoffs is so important, and how you play in the playoffs. And all of a sudden, you start believing in yourself. I believe in momentum, I believe you know, players feel it too. You know, the year the Kings won the cup, there was no way they were gonna lose, you just felt it, you went to games and you knew Quick was gonna stop everything. Kopi was to score the big goals and play so well, both end of the ice, and then you had all those great players doing their job, and so, momentum is so key. So, I'd say, I mean, obviously there's 10 teams that, you know, we could flip a coin at this one, but it's too premature.
Yeah, because there are 10 others that easily could sneak in there and surprise everybody.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the part that's so fun.
Yeah.
Is watching how it develops. So the story of the season it's a blast. You know, we like talking about it every week because it changes.
I picked Toronto the second they signed Tavares. I'm like, that's it,
Yeah.
Toronto. I'm still
Yeah,
sticking
and
with
after
that.
last night's games,
Yeah.
Toronto's on their way, you
Yeah.
know, because they score a lot of goals and they're fun to watch. you
Yeah,
know?
I think I was looking at Tampa Bay as being primed to win a cup also. So I mean I think you know.
Yeah.
It could be out of the West though, for sure. I mean, you know, the Golden Knights may be off to a shaky start, but that means nothing. They've got a lot of firepower. So does Winnipeg. The Sharks have a whole new day with Erik Karlsson. And
Yeah.
it's like, it's insane.
A lot of hockey to be played
Yeah.
anyway, you
Yeah,
know,
it's a
this
lot of
year,
fun.
so.
Well, listen, Pat, we really appreciate you coming
You're
on.
welcome.
This was awesome. You know,
You're
you have
always
so
welcome.
much knowledge and your experiences. It's so valuable. We learned so much from you, and
Well,
we're looking forward to the year.
I'm more than happy to be back again, so
Yeah.
another time.
Well, thanks
Appreciate
again.
it, thank you so much.
Thank
guys.
you.
Alrighty.
Thank you.